After a number of creative people we interviewed digitally, finally we have someone live, and it's Lizzie. What about education?
Education?
Yeah, somehow I think, I don't know, think about fashion brands. On one hand, fashion brands need to find a reason to be, because the big movements died already. Avant-garde fashion is not there since 20 years, 30 maybe. And luxury is self-defining quiet luxury, if they want to hide. And mass merchandising has problems with sustainability. So I think and I feel that fashion needs to educate their clientele to be understood, to be something more than just clothing and accessories. I don't know, what do you think about that?
First of all, quiet luxury, well, that's a trend. But I think it goes beyond that. I do feel that, in fact, I was talking to a young lady just prior about what it means to be in fashion. And I think that what it means to be in fashion is that you have to have a voice. We do have the luxury of being able to make some huge impacts on the world. And I'm not so sure that I really do agree with you anymore about quiet luxury. It seems to be like that, but there are brands that are really pushing to look after the world in education, and I'm starting to see inroads. There's a long way to go, and believe you me, 10 years' time, we'll still be probably saying, what else are we going to keep doing to look after things and educate those that are coming up? I don't want to leave a world behind us that is with loose ends not tied. I want to make sure that all of you who are going to be the leaders of the future don't have to stop and clean up our mess.
So you introduced a topic quite interesting to me, and yesterday we were at dinner and we talked about convergence. So the next question is, who will win the battle between virtuality and materiality? I mean, will the artificial intelligence lead to a return of craftsmanship, or maybe a mix of the two? What is going to happen there?
First of all, I don't think that AI is going to lead the world, and I don't want anyone to feel scared at all that that's going to happen, even though I have to admit that this morning, if you read the newspapers, that the actors have all gone on strike, and one of the reasons they've gone on strike is because they're scared of AI. It shouldn't be like that. I wrote an article just recently for The Impression about using AI to our own advantage. And when we use technology, it can be used to our advantage, and I think that within creativity, the two can really meet and co-create. I think that's a very important word. And what we spoke about yesterday was having technology on one hand and the creativity on the left, bless you. And so Danilo actually brought up a wonderful idea, and he showed his iPhone. And this is technology, and we use it all the time. But what do we have around our iPhone to keep it safe or to keep cards in and so on? We have a cover. Now that cover is a creative item. It's also crafted, it's artisanal, it's probably something that Danilo might have had for some time. It has maybe some empathetic memories to it, but whatever it is, it means that there is something where you can hold the two together and one can complement the other. In fact, this morning there was an article that I read, again from The Impression, and somebody else had written it, and it was about AI and the attributes. And again, that young lady wrote about it, same idea, that we should use AI to our advantage, and that people in this day, and maybe in 10 years' time, and I'm sure it will happen, we can't lose sight of the tangible. We all still want to feel and touch. And I think that is a very important part to remember, Danilo. I think that the feeling and the touching and the creativity, and just like you and I are talking, because we're not doing a Zoom, which is wonderful. I get to hug you and meet everybody.
I would also touch the point of methodology, because this is also what we discussed yesterday evening. And it's regarding the word trend forecasting. How do you trend forecast the trend forecasting? I mean, we don't even want to call it that way anymore. So what is the evolution of this science?
Trend forecasting, we feel that perhaps it's not the right terminology anymore. Many others use it as a strategic foresight, but strategic foresight is also something that's perhaps a little bit more clunky. But the idea behind trend forecasting is to remember that it's what we're in the business of doing. And it's not just about forecasting trends. That's why it's an anomaly. When we think about forecasting, we're thinking about the impact that we're going to make on the future and how we're going to analyze it. Where do we glean all our information from? And is it just a science, or is it something that's innate? And I think that forecasting is something that is innate. I think it's within everybody, and therefore it is something that we can absorb. If we absorb everything around us in the world, then, and you tap into what's happening, you can really start to understand where we will head in 10 years.
So sustainability basically becomes more about consciousness. Makes sense, because if you think, when we say plastic bottles are polluting the world, especially the sea, if you find plastic bottles in the sea, but plastic bottles are not self-throwing in the sea. Someone is throwing them, right? So it's about education, about consciousness, and so on. So you mentioned the city. You mentioned cities. I have a perception that cities are changing a lot, or maybe not the cities themselves, but the way we live them, and also the relationship between the city, the country around, and the suburbs. And, you know, like if you take big cities, metropolises, like, I don't know, New York, for example, after pandemics, the city suffered a lot. Like an empty container with many people leaving and going to, I don't know, live to Florida or California. No, actually, even from California they are escaping. So what was the center of our business, of our life, and the goal for many young people to have success going there and, you know, being successful in their career and so on, somehow is not the same anymore. If we look at smaller cities, like let's take Florence. Here in Florence there is a reaction to pandemic with overpopulation, over-tourism, like excess of it. So where are we heading in terms of urbanism, in terms of city life?
There the pendulum always does swing both ways, Danilo, and you always find that after one escapade like we've just had, then the pendulum swings the opposite way and it becomes something that's even more exacerbated than it ever was before. But the good news about that is that excess is excess. There is too much of it and people can't put up with that. And again, I feel that this pendulum is starting to swing back to some form of normality. And I know that city leaders are looking at urbanization of the city in order for people to feel more comfortable, to understand much more about going back to that word community and well-being, to draw people back into the city and be a little bit more cognizant of how we are living our lives. And I keep looking out of the window here because I see this fantastic greenery, but there's wonderful buildings, architecture that is actually being diversified, and it sounds a little bit esoteric, but it's not. We're building wonderful workplaces, environments that actually are work-friendly, where you have greenery that's around the building, you have sustainable water supplies, and then you have greenery on the roof. We're building something that is making people feel much more at home. So therefore, I think that, to your point about too much excess, I think that we're actually starting to feel that there's a swing back the other way, little bits. And again, it's about education.
I would like to pose you a question about business. So we mentioned Gen Z before, and we know that major brands, some of them, in the last 10 years, they had a lot of commercial success thanks to millennials. I mean, they were able to represent their values, and for that reason, they were very successful. Lately, some of them, they had to change their designer or their creative director because the new consumers are Gen Z. So we don't have to hide ourselves. I mean, trend forecasting or strategic foresight is also about business. And so how will fashion brands be able to represent this new generation? Because I think this new generation is asking for participation, while branding at that level is exactly the opposite.
I have one key word for you: transparency. And I think that if brands are going to attract the Gen Z, then I think they have to have an enormous amount of transparency within their businesses. And it's a long way to go yet, but I think that there's definitely some small inroads that are being taken. And you talk about the shifting of creative directors. I think that I'm not so sure about one, but I think that the shift of creative directors is encapsulating a younger market with different sensibilities. And certainly Gen Z has a different sensibility. As we know, millennials were all about the me factor, whereas Gen Z are much more aware about what's going on in the world around them. And so therefore, if a brand is going to be showing all of the key factors, again, the words that we've already talked about, but if a brand is bringing all of that within to their realm with a new creative director, then I think that is absolutely the road for brands to be able to win the new Gen Z customer.
We need to do something that we always do with a very good interview. So our guest is ending the interview with a statement, which is what represents you, what you think is most important to say in a short way.
A fundamental requirement of a forecaster is to be absolutely aware of the mechanics of the world. You need to listen, you need to look, and you need to absorb. And by being responsibly aware, we can promote diversity, inclusivity, and equal distribution of wealth and opportunities. We can look after the world. We can thereby foster a more vibrant and inclusive digital landscape. We need to consider being serious about the future and what it means, to keep listening, to keep looking and learning about what's new and next, and together we will imagine a better tomorrow.